this week's Dragonblade Authors Unplugged. I'm excited to talk to our Dragonblade authors. This week we have Linda Ray Sand with us and Rachel Ann Smith. Ladies, thank you for joining us. I appreciate you taking the time. And
Thanks for having us.
we had a really busy week this week. We had 4 releases this week. Unfortunately, Maeve Grayson is not able to be with us today, but she had Scott to Haven to Hold from her Once Upon a Scott series, and May Thorne also had a little bit of a cold and had to step out today. So we'll to both of them in future weeks. May's book is Dangerous, which is book 2 in the Poisonous Passion series. So lots and lots of stuff going on this week. I'll make sure I pop the links to all the books, all 4 books in the comments. So if you haven't gotten yours, you'll be able to grab them. So you have them for weekend reading if you haven't read it already. So ladies, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I appreciate it. Linda, your book released the first this week, and it is The Courage of the Lion. It's part of the Lion's Den series. Can
Yes,
you
that's
tell us
right.
a little bit about it?
Sure. This is my first release for Dragonblade. I've been writing for about 7, 8, 9 years now. And so this was kind of exciting to get asked to do this. The Lion's Den Collected World has over 60 books in it so far. So there was plenty of material to use as research, kind of for background. You just have to work within the collected world with the background characters and the setting. And so in my story, I always have 2 romances in my books. And so I have 2 heroes and 2 heroines.
Oh
And my
wow.
Yeah, and so my first hero is Captain Charles Audley. He's just returned to London from Waterloo, where he was badly injured, and is now he considers himself a cripple, so he doesn't think he's marriageable. And his brother is the Earl of Leicester, and his earldom is on the brink of bankruptcy. So he's in search of a bride with a really good dowry, but he's left London to go find her, and leaves his brother to try to find money that might be owed to the earldom. And so Charles goes off to several places, including the Lion's Den, to collect money, and doesn't know that the battlefield nurse that saw to him in Belgium is her mother has decided that she's ruined, and that the only way she's going to find a husband is if she hires Mrs. Bessie Dove Lyon of the Lion's Den to be the matchmaker for her daughter. And
I love
so that's one set of people. And then meanwhile, James the Earl has gone off to Cambridgeshire to propose to somebody he knows has a huge dowry. Unfortunately, he's about the 9th or 10th one to get there. And so before he, and of course, the woman's already decided who she's going to marry. But he comes across someone else who turns out to be very unusual, kind of a hoydenish young lady named Eloise. She says, "If you don't call me Elle, I will never speak to you again." And so he quickly learns that how he can fall into her favor, and then the two kind of uh, put together a very interesting relationship. And so it was
it.
really fun to work with these 2 very disparate characters,
Oh, it
and pull
sounds
it all
like it.
together in the end. Yeah.
So what made you decide to do two complete love stories?
From the time I started writing, it just the first few books that I worked on, it just kind of happened that way. It was like
Mhm.
my minor characters kind of, I think they get out of control sometimes, and then it was like, why fight it? It makes a more complete book to have a couple of more. It's like 2, nobody else was doing it, so having 2 complete happily ever afters at the end of the book seemed
Yeah.
more satisfying, I guess. And it just continued to work. And so when I plot books, it makes setting up those romance beats a little easier, because you can have them in different places throughout the book and keep your reader entertained.
Yeah, that's
So
interesting pacing. That's
yeah.
interesting to think about. Oh, very cool. Very cool. You're the first person that I've heard of doing that. There's always often a secondary character who gets kind of a sideways happily ever after, but I haven't heard of 2 complete stories. That's very cool.
Thanks.
Um, so Rachel, your book is the Duke of Aces, and it's the second book in the Ladies of Risk series. Is that right?
It is the second book. And so we get to revisit with Lady Isadore Malbury, who is the second daughter. And poor Maverna, she still hasn't got her HEA yet. So, but I'm working on that as we speak. Like literally, she's finally talking to me. So, but Isadora is going back, and they're going back to London for her season, her third season. And she doesn't want to have anything to do with marriage because she wants to see Minerva happily married first. And so she's dead set against anything about going to balls. She doesn't want to have anything to do with it. She also has her lady salon, the secret lady salon that she has been promoted to be the leader of this season. And so she is too busy with all, organizing events, masquerade balls, other gaming events. And then comes along the Duke of Avondale, who would like to also use the same venue that the salon has been using for the last couple of years. So they decide that they are going to have a series of bets to see who would actually get to use the venue. So hence, we go on this lovely happy trail of different wagers. And of course, they get their happily ever after because we couldn't have romance without one. So, yes.
And a double booking along the way.
Yes.
Well,
but actually, I was thinking about Linda. I was like, oh my gosh, like in the back of my mind, my next story has actually two couples in it also. And I was like, I haven't actually read any that were like that. So I'm going to have to do some more reading.
Yeah. So you both talked about your characters talking to you. Do you get the characters first when you're working on the story, or does the plot come to you first? How do your stories normally come to you?
Ooh, that's a good question. A lot of my characters, because I work in my own set of worlds, I have the what a lot of people refer to as the aristocracy series, the daughters of the aristocracy, the sons of the aristocracy, and the latest one is the heirs of the aristocracy. I'm on the second generation of people. These are the people that were born in those very first few series that I wrote 7 or 8 years ago. And so it's been really fun. I've got an existing character set. And so this world of hundreds of characters, I think one of my reviewers refers to them as my anthill of characters. Anyway, so I always have a whole cadre of characters to pull from, or at least are relatives of them. And so I start with them. But because I'm working within a series like this is the heirs of the aristocracy, so I've got I'm finishing up the 7th book in that right now. That comes out next month, and those will kind of wrap up that one generation. But I've already been doing research for the next series, the Grand Tours of the Aristocracy. So I'll get another generation of guys who are doing their grand tours over in Sicily and Italy and Greece and whatnot. So.
Do you have like a tree, not like a family tree, like a little thing that readers
series Bible kind of thing?
My genealogical chart for my characters. If I were to print it out, it's about 45 inches wide and about 14 inches tall at 9-point type. Because I've just been adding on to it all these years, and because I had to set it up for myself, because otherwise I was going to be marrying off somebody to their uncle or, to a really close cousin.
Or you forget babies that way.
Yeah. And so this has been so helpful to have just started it early. And of course, then my readers are like, it's on my website. The pieces of it are so that, because I do have people that actually print the thing out, actually put it all together. So, but it's fun to kind of keep track of people. I did really help on this latest book because I did almost marry girls to their nephews. I mean, it was just, it just seemed like it was so far apart. And then it was like, wait, no, they're not. And so I had to change my characters. So I would.
Well, if you're doing two couples for every book.
What's that?
If you're doing 2 couples for every book, that's a lot to track.
Yeah. Yeah, and then all those babies. So,
So, Rachel, do your characters talk to you?
Oh yes. So I can't write unless they are talking to me. So there's a lot of coffee involved because I have to wait. And when they talk to me, it's so crazy. It's like this whole conversation in a movie that's happening in my head that I have to then somehow get onto the page. And so my editors aren't sometimes, they're like, you're missing entire sections because it happened in my head, but I just didn't quite get there. So my editing and I spend a lot of time in the editing cave because it has to go through a series of drafts in order for the whole picture to actually get onto the page. And then every time, it's kind of like when you watch a movie, right? Like if you watch the movie the first time, you see a set of things. And then if you watch it the second time, you see, oh, that was in the background, or somebody else appeared, or something. So it's exactly like that for me. Like when I read and I write, it's the same. Like when I read a book, I'm like, it's literally a movie playing in my head, which is kind of different because when my husband, who's a lovely beta reader, reads it, he just reads the words and he's like, I think you're missing something. Like you've jumped. Like you see that, but there's no romance movie happening in his head when he's
It's interesting that you say that you do multiple drafts, because I think that idea of like when you've got it sorted out for yourself, it sometimes takes away some of the drive to actually get it on paper. It's like, well, I know what's going to happen, so it's like you don't need to actually get through it. So that having to figure out how to craft a story and how to continue to refine a story until you get to the finished book is an interesting process. Linda, do you write in drafts, or do you do one or two classes?
I would say it's more like layers. I used to work in the animation film industry,
Oh
and
yeah.
so we always had to, they start from storyboards and all that, and it really helps in crafting a novel to think visually and to think of it like a movie. And so
Yeah.
that for me is probably the way to go. So I'll start with that first, I know my settings and I know my characters and I know my basic plot. I may not know all the subplots at the very beginning,
Mhm.
but I can layer those in, and I don't always write linearly. I'll sometimes write out of
Oh.
sequence. And I know some authors in
Hmm.
my author group, they're like, how do you like how can you write out of sequence? But if you already know, say, your ending, or you already know your
Yeah.
middle, like climax or whatever, and you can just get that down, then I work in a program called Malel, which makes it very easy for me to move chapters around and to order things, and then I'll just go back in and revisit chapters um, and kind of uh, enhance them as I go.
Mhm.
I guess the best way to
Yeah.
say.
That's interesting. I have friends who write out of order too, and some of the best writing craft classes I've taken or lectures have used animation as a sample, because the storytelling is so tight. It has to be,
Right,
because you can't go wandering all over the place. So
right.
that's what an interesting background.
Mhm.
Excuse me, I'm trying really hard not to cough today. This week has been a bit of a challenge. Um, so can you tell me a little bit, ladies, about what you have coming up?
Well, for me, it's let's see, next month, I have a story called The Bride of a Baronet in the Secrets, Scandals, and Seductions box set. It's available for pre-order and on Amazon, Apple Books, and Kobo. And that was a fun one to work on. It's a shorter book than usual for me. But and it just hints at a second romance. It's
Mhm.
just too short to really include two full romances in. And then July 17th will be, or excuse me, June 17th will be the release of The Honor of an Heir, which is the
Oh,
seventh
cool.
book in the Heir series, and the Heirs of the Aristocracy series. And then I have a couple of books, short ones that I did for an Australian publisher, and those come out in September and October.
Oh, cool. Cool.
Wow.
And Rachel, you have more in the Ladies of Risk series, is that right?
One more.
One more.
Yes, we have
Minerva's
King.
story.
Yeah. King takes Queen. So I'm working on that right now. We're layering, and Minerva's like not really wanting to give up all her secrets at once. Like she's like very private. But I'm working on that. So hopefully we're gonna get that one done and out soon. And then I'm also working with Chastity and a few of the other Dragonblade authors on a anthology that comes out in September. It's called The Wedding Wager. And
cool.
yeah, so cards, playing card. Every story I write ends up with some type of playing card game, or I don't know. So they love to play card games, kind of like me. So I have that coming out, and then I have a couple of contemporaries also coming out. So it's all just the voices. As soon as I can get them onto the page, but I can't write that fast. I'm a lot slower because of this whole reiteration process. But I get there slowly but surely.
Sounds like it's a busy year for everyone. So you talked about card games in your stories, and you said you like to play cards yourself. I love to play cards. I almost never get to do it. Are there specific games that you've come across when you were researching your books that you were unfamiliar with, or things that you found interesting?
So I started like with games that we play, we at home with the kids, like Gin Rummy, and then, we're teaching them poker now, and like, even like memory and things like that, those type of games that you wouldn't think could be even like gambling games, but are, or even Blackjack 21, I don't, they say Vignette 21, I think in Lyon. I can't pronounce, my French is horrible. But anyways, those, and then so I started with that, and then I would research what was the equivalent back in that time.
Oh,
and
cool.
the rules are, oh my gosh, so different. And I think it's important that I try to distinguish the rules that were played back then versus there's differences and the similarities of the game, so that the readers can kind of understand what's kind of going on, but like understand that it was loose and fast back then. It's like, there wasn't like hard and fast rules that hadn't been played for centuries. So it was it's very interesting. And then the actual playing cards itself, they had face cards, but the development of like the ace, king, jack, and queen, it didn't like formalize, and it didn't always have like the numbers at the top. There were periods when they did have numbers, and then there were other sets that would just had like 9 flowers or whatever. They didn't actually have it. So yeah, it's really cool. If you look up vintage playing cards, which I spent a lot of time doing because it's really fun and distracting. But yeah, it was really fun to like understand the background of where the playing cards came from and the different designs. And you can find so many cool ones now on Etsy, and how to make your own vintage cards by using tea bags. And I like watching it. I can't actually do it.
This is going to be a whole new Pinterest rabbit hole for me to go down. And then I'm going to convince myself that what I really need to do with the spare time I don't have is learn how to make my own vintage playing cards, because
it looks really cool, but I don't know if I can actually pull it off.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine that they're beautiful though, because it's a little bit like the illuminations and manuscripts and stuff. When you have a chance to make something beautiful in a small space, there would be some really cool ones. It's interesting that the rules are flexible too. And that's something I wouldn't have thought about. Excuse me. Linda, is there anything interesting you've come across when you were researching?
For this book, yes, because at the Lion's Den, in order to win the whoever is up for whatever woman happens to be the one that the matchmaker is trying to find a match for,
Mhm.
she generally knows who she wants the person to end up with. And I think she kind of favors them with a game that they're going to be particularly good at. And in a gambling den, you expect it to be a card game or a dice game,
Mhm.
something like that. But for this particular book, she learns that the hero was because he was in the army, they would arm wrestle over in the army.
Oh my
And
goodness.
because he was a particularly good arm wrestler, despite the fact that he's got this like leg injury, he can still arm wrestle. And so she chooses that as the game that has to be played in order to win for him to win his nurse back anyway. And so that was really interesting because I didn't know anything. I mean, other than having arm wrestled as a kid, I didn't
Yeah.
know there were rules. I didn't know like what, like how does a person arm wrestle? How do you really become a winner? So I ended
So
up
what are the
spending
rules?
well, like there's things like how your elbows have to be on the table and your feet have to be flat on the floor and when you grab hands together to do it, um, if you grab a hand and you twist your wrist a certain way, you can almost always win. But the other
Oh,
person knows that too. So
not the
it's
other
kind of a
people I'd be
game
arm
of
wrestling with. I want to know this.
yeah. So it's like it's not always strength that wins. I mean,
Hmm.
if you can get the wrist to go a certain way, so and you can kind of overpower that, but because you have to stay with your feet on the floor and your elbow has to stay on the table, then it limits how much leverage you can
Hmm.
gain when twisting that your hand over the wrist. So it does help if you have a longer forearm than your opponent, but
Okay.
muscles don't always matter.
Oh,
So anyway, that was it's kind of
that's
a
interesting. I love the idea that your hero considers himself disabled because of his injury, but that the game that she chose for them was a game of physical prowess,
right.
essentially. Like
Yes.
that's a lovely little bit. And the second chance with the nurse too is, like
Yeah.
that's a lovely little bit too. Very cool. Very cool. So are there ritual you're writing? I know we're all sipping. I know we're all sipping something right now, but I think because there's so many colds and COVID and stuff going around, like trying so hard to do myself. But do you have? I know when I'm writing, if I don't have a cup of coffee, I reach for anyway. Are there things that you have to have in place in order, music that you listen to, or certain rituals that you follow to just help with the process?
For me, it's I turn on brain.fm and they have a new
Oh,
version now called my.brain.fm. And I set that to focus on the creativity setting. And usually I'll set it for 2 hours. And so I can, and once that's only been on for about 5 seconds, I'm in the zone and I can start
oh
writing.
wow.
I try to have a cup of coffee, or something like a glass of water or something,
Mhm.
but I'll stay in the zone for the full 2 hours that's running, and I can just write, usually get about 1,200 to 1,500 words written during that time. If I'm not at home, like last night, I walked downtown to one of the restaurants, and I'll sit at the bar and have dinner and have a drink and write on an iPad. And I'll
Mhm.
do that for 90 minutes to 2 hours. And it's weird that if I'm in a restaurant now and I don't have my iPad, I always feel like I should be writing while I'm there because I've just done it that way for so many years.
Do you use
So
a keyboard on your iPad, or do you write with a
yeah, I
transcription
have one
software?
of those the little Logitech keyboards
Oh yeah.
on my iPad, and so it it works great and
Mhm.
because Malel is available for the iPad as well as the iMac, my files go back and forth.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I do not have any rituals. I personally have to have 3 cups of coffee in the morning before my brain turns on. But besides that, I'm really, really reliant on my characters. And
Mhm.
I say that, but if some days I could be sitting there looking at the screen just like this, like, how are we going to show up today? And then, obviously, as you know, this week is kind of really hard. And so when I'm distracted by family and everything, that slows down the whole writing process. Nothing kind of clicks. So then I just go for a walk outside and I hope for the best. And when I sit down, hopefully they pop in my head.
Yeah. This week has been really hard, and we're in a largely female-dominated industry in a woman-run company, a woman-owned and woman-run company, and so there are mothers all around us, and I don't think there's a mother this week that isn't feeling the pain of the mothers who won't welcome their children home, especially because we're watching endings too, with the end of the school year and everything else. So I know all of our hearts go out to the people who are suffering this week and who will continue to suffer as a result of the tragedies that happen. I think it's really hard to be an artist and stay open enough to create and not feel the pain of everything that's going on around. And there just aren't any good words. Like, as people who make their living with words, there aren't any good words for the kind of pain that our neighbors are feeling right now. So we just hold each other a little bit tighter and hold our kids a little tighter, and yeah, they're no good words.
Yeah. But books are a good escape.
They are a good escape, and
they are a good escape.
And we are the people of the happily ever after, and I think that there's a reason for the happily ever after, and particularly, that's the one promise that romance makes. When you sit down with the Dragonblade book, you're going to come out at the end, and you're going to have a happily ever after. You're going to have people will fall in love. That's what everybody wants, regardless of what flavor they wanted or how they wanted. Everybody wants to be seen and to be loved, and sit down with the Dragonblade book, and you will spend your time getting to that point. Even if we take you on twisty turns to get, we'll get to the happily ever after at the end. And I think
if you read Witches, you get 2. You get a bonus.
Yes, that's right.
You get 2 happily ever afters.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. I had I've read books where there have been secondary characters that have gotten there, but it's never a completely developed story. It's usually just a thing. So it's like bonus extra good juice. So
yeah.
It's fantastic. Ladies, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today. I know we had a lot of fits and starts with technology, and we tried to schedule this a couple of times, and there were just so many colds. So getting everybody together was a bit of a challenge. We will see Maeve Grayson in the weeks coming up, and we'll see May Thorne in the weeks coming up too. So, and I'll make sure I put all the books in the comment section. So if you haven't gotten yours yet and you need your happily ever after this weekend, because I think we all, you'll be able to grab yours. Dragonblade books are always the best value when you get them on pre-order period or release. It's when they're the best price, and you can pick up all this week's books for less than what you would pay for a latte. So you should do that, because it's a lot of enjoyment in little tiny packages. So ladies, thanks again for taking the time. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be back here same time next week with next week's releases. See you then. Thanks.